Most Tesla owners set their charge limit to 80% because it's widely considered safe. But the number alone isn't what determines battery health. Long-term degradation depends more on what happens near that limit, how the battery behaves as it approaches full, how long it sits there, and the conditions around it, than the percentage itself. Subscribe for clear, no-myth Tesla ownership insights that actually matter. Why the 80% rule became popular? The 80% rule spread because it's simple. One number is easy to remember and repeat, especially in a space filled with variables like temperature, state of charge, and parked time. Certainty feels reassuring. Online advice rewards clarity over nuance. A single percentage circulates faster than an explanation about battery chemistry and usage patterns. Over time, it began to feel official, even though Tesla doesn't define one universal safe limit that way. In reality, the system is more flexible. Charge limits exist to match different commutes, climates, and routines, while software manages protections in the background. The 80% rule became a convenient shortcut, useful but incomplete without context. What lithium-ion batteries actually react to? Lithium-ion batteries don't react to percentages, they react to voltage. Two cars at 80% can place different stress on their cells, depending on temperature and recent charging history. Time at that charge level also matters. Passing through a higher state briefly isn't the same as sitting there for hours. Long-term aging is driven more by sustained elevated voltage, especially while parked, than by the displayed number. Temperature amplifies this effect. Heat increases chemical activity, making high voltage more stressful. Cold changes resistance and energy absorption. The battery doesn't see 80%. It responds to voltage, time, and temperature working together. The real problem isn't 80%. It's how long you sit there. There's a difference between reaching 80% and sitting at 80%. Charging to that level and driving soon after isn't the same as finishing early and letting the car sit overnight or all weekend. Battery stress depends less on the number and more on how long it remains at higher voltage without being used. If charging completes hours before departure, the battery may sit idle at elevated charge, where gradual strain can build. From the battery's perspective, sustained high voltage matters more than briefly passing through it. Two owners can use the same 80% limit and see different outcomes. The percentage may be identical, but the parked time at that level makes the real difference. Why Tesla's battery management already assumes flexibility? Tesla does not impose a single daily charging limit because the system is designed to accommodate real-world use. Behind the charge limit slider are buffers, controls, and protective logic that manage how energy is stored and released. The percentage shown on the display is an interface, not a direct representation of cell stress. The battery management system continuously monitors voltage, temperature, and usage patterns. Charging speed tapers automatically as conditions change. Thermal systems activate as needed. Protective measures adjust in real time without driver input. These processes operate continuously, whether or not the driver is actively thinking about battery care. This design philosophy is reflected in Tesla's own guidance. The company differentiates between daily driving and trips, encouraging flexible charging behavior rather than a fixed ceiling. Higher charge limits are explicitly supported when additional range is required, indicating that normal variation is expected and accounted for. A rigid rule, such as never charge above 80%, would ignore differences in driving needs, climate, and scheduling. Instead, the system assumes that charge limits will vary and that charging will sometimes finish shortly before driving and sometimes well in advance. Understanding this flexibility helps align owner behavior with how the vehicle is designed to operate, rather than attempting to override built-in safeguards with a single static rule. If this kind of practical Tesla insight is helpful, you're welcome to subscribe. Daily charging is a lifestyle system, not a rule. Daily charging works best when it matches how you actually drive. A short commuter and a high-mileage driver don't need identical limits. If your routine is predictable, charging can simply replace what you used. If your schedule varies, flexibility matters more than hitting an exact percentage. In those cases, reliability outweighs precision. Home charging also lets you control when charging finishes. Ending closer to departure reduces idle time at higher charge levels. Without it, convenience becomes the priority. Over time, consistency matters more than optimization. A routine you can maintain daily is easier on the battery than constantly chasing a perfect number. when 80% is sensible, and when it's arbitrary. An 80% limit makes sense if you drive short distances and the car sits parked for long periods. Lower limits reduce unnecessary time at higher charge levels. But if you drive soon after charging, or use most of that energy the same day, the exact percentage matters far less. The battery doesn't stay at elevated charge long enough for small differences to have meaningful impact. Restraint helps during extended idle time. It matters less when charging and driving are close together. That timing nuance is often overlooked. Higher limits aren't inherently harmful when they serve real driving needs. They're unnecessary only when extra charge goes unused. In that sense, 80% isn't a rule, it's a situational decision. The situations where higher limits are actually neutral. There are many situations in which charging above 80% has little to no measurable effect on battery health. The most common is same-day driving. When charging finishes and the vehicle is used soon afterward, the battery does not remain at a higher state of charge long enough for it to be a meaningful factor. Charging that completes shortly before departure follows the same principle. The higher charge level is temporary. Voltage begins to drop as energy is drawn, and the system avoids an extended holding period. In these cases, timing has more influence than the exact percentage selected. Travel introduces additional variability. Road trips and irregular schedules do not conform to tidy daily patterns. Drivers may need additional buffer, or may not know precisely how far the next stop will be. Charging higher in these situations is a practical response to real-world uncertainty, not misuse. The vehicle is designed to handle occasional higher limits within normal operation. Large-scale ownership data supports the idea that focusing on single rules often exaggerates risk. Real-world analyses of Tesla fleets show that outcomes are shaped more by overall usage patterns than by isolated behaviors, reinforcing the idea that systems and habits matter more than individual settings. When higher charge levels are directly followed by driving, their impact is largely neutral. They become relevant primarily when extra energy sits unused for extended periods. Understanding that distinction helps replace rigid rules with context-driven decisions. What experienced owners tend to learn too late? Most long-term owners go through the same phase. Early on, range anxiety drives every decision. Charge limits feel critical, and small percentage differences seem serious. With time, that pressure eases. The car proves predictable. Real-world range becomes familiar, and charging turns into a simple routine. Many later realize they were optimizing more than necessary. In practice, simplicity works better. A steady, repeatable charging habit causes fewer issues than constant adjustments driven by concern. Batteries favor consistency and gain little from daily fine-tuning. Eventually, owners move from rigid targets to practical ranges that fit their driving, climate, and schedule. It's not about caring less, it's about understanding what truly matters. The one mental shift that protects the battery long-term. The real shift isn't a new percentage, it's a new mindset. Batteries age from repeated patterns, not occasional decisions. What matters most is how often the battery sits near the top or bottom of its range, and for how long. Reducing extended time at extreme charge levels lowers strain far more effectively than chasing one exact number. Tesla's software already manages charging curves, temperature, and protection systems in the background. Constant manual adjustments usually add complexity without meaningful benefit. A steady routine lets the system work as intended. Often, a slightly higher limit used briefly is gentler than a lower limit left sitting for hours. Focus on timing and consistency, not a single percentage. Practical, low-effort charging philosophy. Effective charging habits are usually simple. Avoid leaving the battery very full or very low for long periods when you can. Beyond that, added complexity rarely delivers meaningful benefit. Charging should match real driving needs. If you'll use the extra range, charge higher. If not, filling unused capacity serves little purpose. The limit is there to support mobility, not to impose strict rules. A percentage alone doesn't tell the full story. Timing, park duration, temperature, and how soon the energy is used matter more than the number itself. Low-effort routines encourage consistency, and consistency protects the battery over time. Charging conveniently and finishing closer to departure when possible reduces both stress and unnecessary overthinking. Simple, repeatable patterns tend to perform best in long-term ownership. The bottom line: the idea that charging should always stop at 80% is widely repeated, but it does not reflect how battery health is actually preserved. Longevity is not determined by a single number, but by steady, repeatable use over time. When charging aligns with daily routines instead of working against them, the system manages the rest. Long-term ownership is less about precise behavior and more about avoiding unnecessary strain, both on the battery and on the driver. Once the key factors are understood, charging becomes a background process rather than a recurring decision. Shifting focus from percentages to patterns removes much of the uncertainty. In practice, that is what keeps ownership predictable and uncomplicated over the years. For more no-friction Tesla guidance focused on long-term use, you're welcome to subscribe.